Good afternoon. The next month holds some big events for you guys. Hear that prom is tomorrow night, and it's supposed to be a glowing event, they say. Graduation is right around the corner. So look around the room at your classmates. You may not realize it, but you guys are all part of a special club. You seniors represent the last graduating class of your high school. You juniors will represent the first graduating class of the new school. And your graduating class is a club that doesn't get bigger, it only gets smaller. And you'll create a bond, you'll keep a bond with the people in your class. So years from now, when Dalton Griffith and Des Jordan get drafted for the Cowboys, you guys will be saying, hey, I graduated with those guys. Mark my words, it'll happen. I graduated with a guy who made the majors in baseball, and I never forgot it. So when Olivia Hoover wins Olympic gold in the 200 free, or Riley Spangler becomes the 8-time Jeopardy champion, or Sidney Donovan flies to Mars, you will always remember those folks as part of your club. What you don't want to be remembered for is being the guy who got 40 years in prison, or being the girl who overdosed on fentanyl. As Bill told you, I'm Ann Gardner. I am the Commonwealth's attorney for Alleghany. Along with my 4 assistants, I represent the citizens of Alleghany County, Covington, Clifton Forge, and Iron Gate in criminal cases. We work closely with local and state law enforcement to address crime in our community, and our focus is public safety. So in the criminal justice system, a day makes a difference. The day you turn 18, you're no longer treated like a child, at least in many ways. Suddenly you have the freedom to make choices and mistakes. So what does it mean to be 18? When you're 18, you can go to jail, but you can't buy a beer. You can go to war, but you can't get a concealed firearm permit. You can go to prison, but you can't rent a car. You can vote, but you can't drive an Uber. So really, you're treated like an adult in some ways and not in others, but the important thing to remember is that there are adult penalties for breaking the law. And there are 2 categories of crimes that we deal with: misdemeanors and felonies. Misdemeanors carry up to 12 months in jail, but felonies can carry up to life in prison. And not only that, but if you get convicted of a felony, you lose your civil rights. For instance, you can't vote and you can't possess a firearm. If you're a hunter, you might think about that. I am a hunter, and I would not appreciate that. You also will have a more difficult time finding a job if you get convicted of a felony, and that may not seem like a big deal for you now, but it can be. The booklet that you were given when you came in, it covers a lot of different types of crimes. It's certainly worth a read. Hang on to it. It's a good thing. But in the interest of time, I'm going to focus on 2 types of criminal offenses: driving and drugs. Nobody's really talked about driving yet, but I'm going to do it because I think driving and drugs are a dangerous duo. They not only have the potential for big prison time, but both of those things have the potential to ruin your life or even end your life. Take driving, for instance. We all do it. It's how we get to school. It's how we get to work. I've been in the parking lot out there numerous times. I've seen some pretty cool cars: Camaros, Mustangs, Chargers, other muscle cars. So if you're ever tempted to take one of those out on the highway and open it up just to see what it'll do, think twice, because reckless driving by speed will land you in jail. 20 over the limit, over 85, can land you in jail. Now, what do you do when you see the blue lights behind you? Right? You pull over. Now, seriously, I'm going to tell you why you pull over. Because if you don't, you're just going to make whatever problem you had to start with worse. And some people, too often, people think it's a good idea to try to outrun the cops, and I'll tell you, that never ends well. At best, you'll wind up with a felony conviction, but at worst, you might wind up dead or kill somebody else. I know that's a sobering thought, but those things really happen. And if you don't think they happen around here, I'm going to give you 3 examples that did happen around here, and they happened in the last several years. One of them was right down here at the end of the road. So in the first example, one of the Alleghany Sheriff's deputies attempted to pull a guy over, and these people are all in their early to mid-20s, attempted to pull him over down at Love's. Well, he thought better of it and floored it and took off as fast as he could, and he came in this direction, but because of his speed, he couldn't make the curve at the bridge down there. So he hit the bridge, and he died. So, that's a sobering thought, but I see it all the time. I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've seen so much of that. That's the first example, and that was right here, right down the road from your school. The second one is a fellow who a Clifton Forge officer tried to stop. Going to stop him for a traffic offense, and he decided that he thought he could outrun him, and so he gunned it and took off. The only problem was when he took off at breakneck speed, he hit another driver, and he killed that person. And he didn't get convicted of a traffic offense for that. He got convicted of murder, and he's serving 25 years in prison for it. So driving offenses can turn into something very bad if you don't use good judgment. The third example that I want to use is probably the most recent one. There was a young fellow on a motorcycle coming down 64. State trooper caught him about the 14-mile marker going in the 90s somewhere. So he turned on his lights and got behind him, and the kid didn't stop. He took off, he got faster. He was going 100 plus down 64 with other cars on the road. Decided he was going to duck off the interstate at the 27, so he did, but because he was going so fast, the motorcycle got airborne. When he came back down, he hit the guardrail. He didn't die, but it cut his leg off. He did get convicted of a felony, but for him, that really wasn't the worst of this. He's got to live the rest of his life without a leg because of a stupid decision. And that's the kind of thing that we have to see. So I hope that you'll remember some of those stories. Driving under the influence, it goes without saying that driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs is a crime. I don't really need to go over that. In Virginia, we have zero tolerance, which means that if you're under 21, even a slight amount of alcohol in your system, 0.02 or more, can become a crime. Certainly if you're 0.08 or higher at any age, it's a Class 1 misdemeanor and you can go to jail. A second offense DUI, the penalties are greater. A third offense DUI is a felony. These carry loss of license, and then of course all the negative repercussions of a felony conviction. So DUI, driving fast, reckless driving, racing, don't do it. So I'm going to go to the second prong of what I wanted to talk about, and that's illegal drugs. Bill mentioned Beth Macy, the local author that wrote the 2 books, Dope Sick and Raising Lazarus. And she wrote those books about the devastation that's caused by the opioid crisis and the use of opioid drugs, mainly because they're highly addictive and they're deadly. He talked about fentanyl a little bit. We also see heroin. We see other drugs besides those like methamphetamine. Some drugs are street drugs, some drugs are prescription drugs, but we see that every day in the courtroom. And the possession, the use, the distribution of drugs, they have severe legal consequences, severe, but they also have severe life consequences. Just a little bit about the legal consequences. The code book's full of them, but I'll just mention a few. For just simple possession of a Schedule 1 or 2 drug, you can get 10 years in the penitentiary. And just some examples of a 1 or 2 drug, that's heroin, ecstasy, fentanyl, meth, mushrooms, cocaine, oxycodone, the list goes on. And that's just for having it, that's just for possession. Distribution or possession with intent to distribute, a first offense, 5 to 40. Second offense, 5 to life. Third offense, 10 to life. And for certain drugs, in certain quantities, Possession with intent to distribute can carry 20 to life. I'm not going to give you an exercise in the Virginia Code because you won't remember it and it would take all day, but just suffice it to say the legal consequences for drug possession and drug distribution are heavy. But the life consequences are equally as bad. You know, I heard Taylor mention it earlier, but sometimes when people are charged with serious drug offenses, the ones I just mentioned, they don't get prosecuted. They don't get convicted. They don't even go to court. Now, why would that be? It is because they die before their cases ever come to court. Taylor said he had, I believe, 5 clients. I know of at least that many that I have had to go and dismiss the cases before they came to court because there was nobody left to prosecute. So using these drugs can have severe consequences. People die from overdoses every day. They die right and left. And in addition to other drugs, fentanyl in particular is killing a lot of folks. Marijuana and other drugs are laced with fentanyl so that the people using them don't even realize they're taking it. People should be aware of that. And we've had meth-fueled homicides and meth-fueled crime just right and left as well. Unfortunately, we had a sad anniversary back on March the 14th of this year because a little over a year ago at Covington Farm and Fuel, we had 3 people killed, including a Covington police officer, in a drug-fueled shooting. And finally, I'm going to tell you a story about a former graduate, I believe of Alleghany, I might be wrong, but a former graduate who was a top student, who held advanced graduate degrees, and she decided to inject her boyfriend with what she called, and I'm going to quote, a huge shot of ice which should have rocked his world. Well, it did rock his world. It killed him. He died from meth and fentanyl overdose. But it also rocked her world because she was convicted of murder last year and she is currently serving time in the penitentiary for it. So I could go on and on about this and tell more stories, but I wanted to tell those few because sometimes they resonate more than just getting up here and spewing words out at you. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Becoming an adult is exciting. It's a great time. You have your whole life ahead of you. You've got the freedom all of a sudden to make choices. Just make sure that they're good ones. Thank you.